The Means to an End by its_Kingston on AO3. Episode 7, Chapter 4. Uraraka was wide awake to watch the sunrise that morning, before the birds began calling out, before the ducks that swarmed across her pond began stirring, even before the wind awoke to run through the forest. Uraraka was awake. She had checked her satchel several times, assuring herself that everything was in place. Yes, she'll be leaving today. A smile grew on her face, one that ached as it stretched up to her eyes. Uraraka turned to the window, slightly waiting for her rogue's arrival. She figured Toga would be here soon enough, just as soon as the sun was shedding enough light for her to make her way back to the tower. Impatiently, Uraraka wondered if lighting a candle would suffice. She couldn't catch the sun glinting over the top trees, and deciding on checking her bag again. Her food was packed into one of that Bakugou brought to her and had given her. The other housed her clothes, along with several books, one of her poetry collection, but the rest of the space had been reserved for the many guides and studies that dictated the places she wished to go. Perhaps if Toga was willing to explore, they could travel to them. Not even when checking her supplies could she remove the thoughts of the rogue from her mind. The space she had taken in Uraraka's mind was questionable. When had she moved in there? These feelings towards Torga had poisoned her, sunk into her bones and began to rot them away. Uraraka detested the notion. Poison was a terrible thing. These feelings seemed not to be, for poison did not make one feel as though they could spring wings. Perhaps if Uraraka had not already scouted her way out, she considered this a viable method. After another, final unpacking and repacking of the satchel, to ensure the contents, Uraraka caught the sound of vines rustling. Not bothering to hide how eager she was, she ran to the window. Her eyes immediately fell on a navy blue mask lined with white teeth. "Why, hello," Toga said. Her eyes were wide, though she relaxed after a moment's time and pulled herself fully through the window. "Happy to see me?" "Of course. It seems you were startled, though," Uraraka said, a self-assured smile gracing her lips. "I wasn't expecting you to come running at me," Toga replied. She pulled down her mask, showcasing her toothy grin. "I could have run you through with my dagger, with your hands full of vine. I'd find a way. That is not the way I wish to end our interactions, though, princess," she said. Uraraka could have sworn the myth rolled off of her in waves. "Not the end of our interactions, rogue. You would not be getting out of escorting me down, whether I'm impaled or not." Toga looked curiously at her. "Oh? You say that as if you're surprised," Uraraka observed. "I've been here for 13 years. A single wound would not be responsible for keeping me here for another second, whether it's inflicted by your hand or not." "Well," Toga started. She looked to the ground. Uraraka caught something akin to a smile on her face. She tilted her head back, up towards Uraraka, granting the latter a better view. The smile she wore was innocent in a way that Uraraka didn't know the rogue was. Her heart beat anew, and Uraraka felt it push the poison further through her veins. "I suppose we should leave now if you wish to reach the orchids come breakfast." "Yes," Uraraka murmured. She backed away from the window, stopping beside the table. Toga watched her. "Cold feet?" Uraraka looked at her hastily. "Nothing of the sort. I'd like to bring my belongings with me," she said playfully as she snatched up the pair of satchels. "Do you worry?" "A bit," Toga admitted. "Your loyalty to the kingdom is something I cannot understand. Perhaps you would regret coming with me." "No," Uraraka said firmly. "I wish to see the world, and would do so until I am needed." Toga nodded. "Of course." "How will you go about getting myself and my belongings down from here?" Uraraka asked. "I'll return to the base of the tower, and you could drop them down to me. They'll only serve to get in the way, and climbing this tower can be tricky." Toga said. All right, Uraraka said. One contained glass jars of fruit. Do you believe it will survive the fall? Ha, packed food, Toga said. I'm glad you remembered such a thing. I suppose I should carry that one down with me. And you'll be all right. Toga gave her a soothing smile. Yes, of course. I worry for you more than me. Uraraka passed the satchel to Toga, who looped it over her shoulders with ease. It's not too heavy. Uraraka watched her turn to the window and plant her hands on the windowsill. With a flourish and a wave, Toga was over the edge. Uraraka stepped forward and leaned out the window, watching Toga maneuver her way down. She reached the bottom of the tower after a long moment and pulled the satchel from her shoulder, setting it down on the ground. Toga looked up at the tower at Uraraka. I'm ready, she called. Uraraka retrieved the satchel from the table. Gripping it by the straps, she leaned out the window and lowered it as far as she could. The distance between the bottom of the satchel and Toga's outstretched arms was still great. Uraraka was glad she hadn't attempted jumping down. From this angle, it was easy to see how far the drop was. I'm dropping it, Uraraka shouted down. After ensuring Toga heard her message, Uraraka released the straps and let the bag fall. It was caught with a thud and a wince, followed by Toga's voice. Have you loaded this with bricks? Do you fear of missing your tower? Uraraka laughed quietly. She remained halfway out the window, watching the rogue with a smile. I hope you do not plan on having me jump from the top. Come back up, she hollered. She couldn't make out the expression that resided on Toga's face, but knowing her as much as Uraraka did, she would bet it was a smile. Toga gripped the vines in one hand, the other fitting nearly in the cracks between the bricks. Uraraka had never watched her climb the tower before. Moments ago had been the first time she had seen her descend it. Uraraka looked on with interest. The vines seemed to shift around her, just as she wanted them to. She charted a road up the wall, making use of every crack. Or perhaps every crack was placed across the outer wall just for her to use. Yes, Uraraka would believe it, for it was the prince was born to do such a thing, to climb up and down the stone wall. Then this rogue was crafted for it, built by hand for such a feat. Minutes passed, and Toga was there, holding herself upside down the window, face to face with Uraraka. They were close. So close, Uraraka noted. She could see the changing size of Toga's pupils in great detail. There was a chance she was hearing Toga's heartbeat, but Uraraka assumed the sound came from her own tremulous, poisonous plumping heart. She called it poison, not because it killed and hurt, but because the feeling spread through her heart like poison through the tower, well, quickly and efficiently. Deadly. How are you going to get me down from here? Uraraka asked. She forced herself to step back from the window, hearing the deliberate noise of every step she took. It only to give Toga enough space to step through the window without tripping. Simply, I am not, Toga said. Before Uraraka could misunderstand, she continued. I told you from the beginning that I am no prince or knight. I cannot get you down, or be your savior. As I wish to be your equal, I will guide you. You will climb the tower of your own accord. Uraraka studied her in the light of the rising sun for a moment. It trailed in behind her, sending light of color of Florence through the messy strands of her hair. Her mask hung at her neck, not needed now in such an intimate moment. Uraraka watched back, anxiety evident in the way her eyes couldn't stay fixed on the woman's face. This rogue, the enemy of the kingdom, who approached unannounced and spoke of murder like baking, had weaseled her way into the tower and Uraraka's life. Her heart, even. She supposed there was nothing to do but trust her. All right, though I do hope you're good as a guide as you are a victor, Uraraka said. Toga visibly relaxed at that. Her normal wild smile returned to her face, right where it belonged, Uraraka figured. I do believe I am. We'll find out shortly. Come now. First, Toga said. She pushed herself up into the windowsill and sat down between the shutters. Pulling her gloves off her hands, she continued speaking. I like to give these to you. I can lower myself down without them. but I believe you will find them useful. They're likely to fit. Uraraka looked at the brown hive's gloves held out to her. Thank you, she said. She reached out to accept the gloves, but noted a small scar across the back of Toga's hand. Oh, she muttered, inaudibly. Instead of gripping the gloves, she took Toga's hand and gently flipped it. What is that from? Just a battle, Toga said. She seemed to know what Uraraka was talking about without looking towards it. Her eyes remained on Uraraka's face. A failed attempt on my life. For them, at least. Quite successful for me. I disarmed them shortly after they inflicted that. A crease formed between her eyebrows as she looked at it. I'm glad they did not succeed. Toga laughed lightly. A beautiful sound. I'd agree. Uraraka smiled and let Toga pull the gloves into her hands before the rogue turned. Uraraka lightly caught her hand again. Fluidly. Uraraka leaned down and pressed her lips to the scar. She straightened back up and looked at Toga. Truthfully, I am. My life would be so much worse without you. I enjoy your company. Toga stared at her for a moment, her mouth open slightly. If I was ever here, you would not know of me. There would be no company to miss. Her cheeks were reddening, as if she just climbed the tower side tenfold. Uraraka could feel it in her own face, the same redness that washed over Toga's. Like fire, it burned across her face. I would know that there was something wrong, something amiss. Even if I never got the fortune of meeting you, you changed my life inevitably, and I am grateful for such. I wish you to not think of me as a savior. I am not deserving of such a title, Toga said. The emotion was willing in her eyes, pouring out in the way her hands folded Uraraka's, consciously or not. She was met with the acceptance of a hold as tight as her own. You're a friend, though, one whose company has brought me much greater joy than I ever expected to receive in such a long time I was imprisoned in these walls. It matters not the title, though I do believe you deserve such. I'd much rather be your equal, Uraraka said. She ran her thumb across Toga's knuckles, loving and reassuring in ways undescribable through rigid, inflexible words. Thank you, Toga murmured, soft and quiet. Uraraka hummed and moved closer, locking her arms around Toga's waist. Her chin dipped down to rest on the other woman's shoulder for a brief moment. Thank you, too, Uraraka said. She stepped back and smiled. Now, the orchid? Toga grinned at that. Uraraka thought her to look impossibly carefree, like nothing had ever plagued her mind or caused her to worry. She knew that to be false, but the air about Toga was fighting against the accusation. Of course. Let us be on our way. Yes, Uraraka said with a smile. She pulled the gloves over her hands as she watched Toga drop back out to the window. Had she never even stepped foot in? Uraraka hadn't taken her eyes off of her long enough to know the answer to such a question, and called for Uraraka to follow her. The princess closed her eyes, put a hand at the window sill, and took a breath. Looking around at her tower, at the unmade bed and empty wardrobe, the pantry with its open door, and her brother's paintings. She was embarrassed to think of how she'd missed the normality of the tower. She was going to leave. Such a thing was long since decided, but the thoughts of facing the unknown brought back memories of earlier conversations. The unknown is to be feared, she recalled herself saying. Uraraka remembered the look on Toga's face, better than the spoken words, though. Her smile, small and pained, and misunderstood. Uraraka took her first step out the window. She promptly almost fell, and wasn't aided by the strange laughter that Toga couldn't help. That's hardly a foothold up there, Otako. Hold on to the vines and press your shoes to the wall. We'll be sliding down. Careful not to get tangled, Toga said. As if to prove an example, she began lowering herself down the tower, hands clasped around the vines. Uraraka could see the tension of muscles beneath her shirt. Muscles she doubted she had. Say I fall. What then? I'd suppose I'd try to catch you. But then we both tumble down. Perhaps I should try to get out of the way instead? Toga teased. I trust you will not fall, though. Uraraka took a shaky breath in and let her hands find the vines. They felt different. But maybe that was because she never truly taken the time to observe the nature that practically forced its way into her tower. It felt tamed in a way, like it was impure nature, not all the kind she wanted to explore. The morning dew should have coated it, though it was hardly noticeable. There was a chance that Toga's passage had already cleared it away. She removed her other foot from the window sill and trusted the vine with her weight. Christ! Uraraka shouted as she dipped down. The vines held strong, catching her, yet the experience was terrifying nonetheless. Oh, Chaco! Toga said. She sounded scandalized with the way her voice fluctuated. Invoking the Lord's name in vain? Laughter came after that, light-hearted and bubbly. Quiet, Uraraka replied. It's the fault of my brother. She gripped the vines tighter in her hands and began letting herself slide down the tower. It was horrifying at first. Uraraka was tense, only noticing so once her shoulders began to ache with a pain more than simply holding herself would create. Though the tanned hide of her gloves, she could hardly feel the shifting of the vines between her hands. She hoped she'd be able to cling to them if the need arose. Uraraka was put at ease as she looked down the tower wall at Toga, though. She was alternating between vines and handhold carves into the stone to lower herself down. There was a quiet, determined skill about her that Uraraka wanted to watch forever. To return to the tower's top, simply to watch Toga scale it, until the movements were second nature to the princess. Toga looked up at her, perhaps because she felt Uraraka's gaze linger on her, or heard the rustle halting between her head. Are you all right? She asked. Fine, Uraraka said. She looked back in front of her, pressed her soles tightly to the wall, and began descending again. Your process might hasten if you quit staring at me. Toga gripped. There'll be time for that at a later date. I suppose so, she said. You're quite beautiful, though. There was a flurry of sounds, vines squelching, and boots grinding against brick. Uraraka readjusted her hold on the ropes like plant and looked down the tower again. Toga was clutching onto a vine, peering at Uraraka. Carefully, the latter asked, Did you almost fall? Perhaps, Toga said. She cleared her throat, though it didn't help alleviate the redness of her cheek. I wasn't prepared. You caught me off guard. She took a breath and continued descending. The pair were nearing the bottom faster than anticipated, and for that, Uraraka was joyful. The vines grew denser as the dirt came closer. Uraraka withdrew her foot from the wall, careful to not get tangled in the mess of vines, and repositioned. Her shoe squeaked against the vine, but her process was hardly implemented. A barren patch of the tower posed a problem, yet the solution was to copy as the rogue had done. Uraraka secured the tip of her gloves to the crack, fingers gripping tightly against the inner parts of the brick, and continued down. She almost slipped and struggled to get the gloves back free, but it worked well enough. She wasn't approaching the same efficiency as Toga, who waited at the bottom of the tower, but within minutes she was close enough to plant her boots to the dirt. Mere feet from the ground, Uraraka was wearing a dazzling smile. Himiko? Mm-hmm. Are you prepared now? She asked, voice high and unassuring. In truth, she might have been stalling, clinging onto a tower so desperately she wanted to escape. The chance of leaving, however, pleasant sounding, was changing nonetheless. And change brought uncertainty. Uncertainty brought fear. Toga huffed, crossing her arms good-naturedly. The only reason I wasn't expecting it was because I receive nary a compliment like such. The mask and dagger tend to assure that. Perhaps I myself do as well. Uraraka scowled at the bricks. Nonsense, you must. I have nothing to gain from a lie, Toga said. It matters not. Come now, Chaco. The sun rises quicker than I assured it would. We'll be having a late breakfast. No, I think it matters a fair bit, Uraraka replied. The time of breakfast? I suppose we could wait until tomorrow if you truly wanted it to be that early. Uraraka slowly moved her foot to the ground, dropping her weight to it as she shook the other shoe free from the vines. The ground was solid, far denser than her wooden floors. She hopped from one foot to another, watching small clouds of dust as they flittered out of her sides, drifting until they dispersed, taking a few tentative steps forward, as if the ground might realize she wasn't supposed to be out of the tower yet and swallow her up. Ochako approached. Her heart felt as though it thundered around her chest as she took her first few steps across the padded dirt, but she did her best to ignore the feeling as she took Toga's hand in her own. A continuation of the conversation in the tower, Uraraka thought with a smile. You know I do not speak about the time we arrive at the orchids. Uraraka said. You're due much kinder words than you've received. I'm aware, she replied bitterly, though the harsh edge of the tone seemed not to be directed at Uraraka. So, Uraraka released her hand. You'd do good to remain prepared for a surprise attack. Toga looked to be hardly containing laughter. A surprise attack? Of nice words, not weapons, Uraraka said. She wore a smile, one far larger than the one she had worn in her tower. This one brighter, toothier than normal. Toga distantly wondered if it was a mercy, an indication that Uraraka had no qualms with the way the rogue existed herself. It was a comfortable thought, one she clung to, even if it was proven to be wrong. Well, Toga said, regaining her wits, expect a harsher comeback. I am nothing if not a victor. Uraraka chuckled in reply. Her arms were stuck out to her sides, a bit as she finally looked up at the sky, spinning slowly to take in the sights around her. Tree branches that hung over her now, the ponds and the little rocks that adorned it, unseen to her before. The woodland behind her tower just as lush, as full of life as the side and the front of the windows, but new. Toga watched her with quiet awe, unsure of how someone could be so joyous over the mundane sights, but said nothing. She basked in the expression Uraraka wore, a smile sweeter than anything she could think to compare it to, more alive than any person she'd met, any creature she'd seen. So beautiful. Which way to the orchid? Uraraka asked quietly. Toga smiled, held out a hand. When Uraraka took it without question, they began walking. It's not far from here. Perhaps half an hour, if you'd like to take the scenic route. Of course I do. This day wouldn't be terrible, or a waste. Uraraka looked over to her side and caught Toga smiling back at her. She was positive this unknown was nothing to fear. Perhaps this was her best choice. Uraraka tightened her grip around Toga's hand and was met with the same in response. Yes, this was her best choice. Okay, that was so sweet. Aw, I like that. I like that chapter. I loved that chapter. Correction. It's not I liked. I loved. L-O-V-E. Love, love, love. My heart be full of it. Woo, woo, woo. Love, love, love. Oh, how my heart pitter-patters for such cute shit. I don't know. Don't fucking look at me. Okay. Anyways, oh, that was so cute. I really liked it. I liked the subtle flirting that there was there. It was so adorable. It was so cute. I love this. I may or may not have changed some words in their dialect by accident. I think there was one that I noticed as I did it. And I'm like, oh shit. I mean, like, I didn't change much. I forgot what it was. But yeah, it was just that. Sorry. I also noticed you have a lot of what is that when there's like two words but one word? Like I will instead of I will is Al. From my understanding, I think back in the day they didn't use that much at all actually. I'm not sure. I know I am very wary of using it myself because I'm so used to using it. But I know I changed one word, right? Which I don't... It happened in my brain, okay? Look, the Bridgerton dialect is getting to my head, okay? The Bridgerton dialect be getting to thy head. Thy head be infatuated with such ways of speaking. Actually, fuck you, Kingston. I started flirting with my boyfriend in this dialect. Hold up. I think I could pull it up. Pulling up the receipts. Pulling up the receipts. I should put on my glasses. I need to scroll up. We talk a lot. Goddamn. It's not that much. It's just me sending a bunch of things. Where is it? Just know I can't. Okay, I found it, but I'm not gonna say that out loud. Just know I'm flirting with my significant other with words like "I wish to be held upon to my lover," like fancy words, like fancy fucking words, and it's like, look, I don't think you understand. If me and Sunny get into a battle on fancy words and who could come up with fancier words, I am going to lose. Yeah, I'm dating a nerd. A nerd. Sometimes when we're texting, they say a really big word, and, yeah, not even just texting. Sometimes when we're talking to each other as well. But I notice it a lot more when we're texting. They type out a really big word, and they send it. And then sometimes I know what it is, and I'm like, I'm not 100% I know what it is, but with the context that I'm seeing, could it be this? And then I have to search it up. Or I've actually stopped searching it up, and I just ask them, like, what the fuck does this mean? Like, babe, remember, your significant other, English is not their first language. Calm down. Even in my native language, I don't know big words, okay? Especially not in my native language. But, yeah. Anyways, this was really a cute chapter. I really enjoyed it. I cannot wait to see more of this. And I also did not think of the implications of Uraraka never seeing the world. So of course she's going to love the mundane things like rocks on a pond, right? Stuff like that, which, I mean, it makes sense. It makes sense. So I cannot wait to see more of that. So, as always, my raindrops, make sure to eat, sleep, drink water, take your meds. Have a wonderful day or night. Link to my Discord server and socials are down in the description. Subscribe to see more of my content, and thank you so much for watching.